how much does an 18-ounce box of Cheerios cost?
An 18-ounce box of Cheerios?
Mm-hmm.
I don't
See,
eat,
now here's the deal.
I don't eat Cheerios.
That's billionaire Starbucks founder Howard Schultz, igniting all kinds of debates this week on economic populism or how to beat Trump. And for all the buzz about Schultz, there hasn't been a ton of reporting yet on what he actually stood for in all his work since launching Starbucks. But scrutinizing Schultz's record is crucial to determining if he's a benign billionaire or a spoiler billionaire or something that must be exposed right now, long before 2020, a billionaire who has one set of rules for his company and another set of rules for everyone else. Now, Schultz is a business and messaging guru. He's turned basically what started out as 4 Seattle coffee shops into an $80 billion corporation. And along the way, he talks a big game about a company that he says stands for more than just serving up drinks and profits.
We have an obligation and a responsibility as a company to add value to humanity.
I love Starbucks Coffee Company almost as much as I love my family. The love and humanity is also about creating a value system in which the company stands for something.
We're not in the business of filling bellies. We're in the business of filling souls. You might say, okay, they're full of crap and you know, this is how we feel. We love this company.
That was the talk. Now, what was the record? Let's be clear. In some ways, Starbucks has strived for something more than the bare minimum retail practices of grueling corporations like Walmart. Starbucks has been providing health care to their employees since 1988, and the lowest wage it pays is about $10 an hour. Schultz suggests workers are better off in Starbucks America than the rest of corporate America, an argument for him to run a company. But what about running America? Well, Schultz hasn't supported higher wages for all Americans, just some higher wages for his employees to make his company competitive. In fact, this is important. That was the whole issue in his home state back in 2014, because this CEO who'd been talking up raising wages suddenly opposed the government raising wages as policy, be it the government of Seattle or the federal government.
I was in agreement that minimum wage at the state level should go up across the country. It should not be a federal mandate. I was not a supporter of the Seattle City Council going to $15 an hour. I think there will be unintended consequences for small businesses at that level.
On college tuition, you can see the same pattern. Starbucks America versus Howard Schultz's America. Consider the company touts how it covers college tuition for full and even part-time employees who don't already have a 4-year degree. And they say they'll have over 2,000 students graduating by 2018. That seems to be a good thing. But what about the government subsidizing college tuition for people who don't happen to work at Starbucks? Schultz says we can't afford it.
No, I'm not a Democrat. I don't affiliate myself with the Democratic Party, who's so far left, who basically wants the government to take over health care, which we cannot afford, the government to give free college to everybody, and the government to give everyone a job, which basically is $40 trillion on the balance sheet of $21.5 trillion. We can't afford it.
When a politician says we can't afford something, they're telling you that thing is not their priority. This is a non-ideological observation. Some candidates want to spend more on college, some on the military, some on a wall, some on health care. Howard Schultz ran a company that decided it could afford college and health care for some of its employees. Good for them. Now he's touting that very experience as the basis for why he should run the whole country, but without those kind of benefits. As a talented messenger, Schultz still implies the values he took to Starbucks will benefit the American people.
I have walked in their shoes. I'm on both sides of the equation. I'm somebody who is successful. I'm somebody who came from the projects, and I understand the American people.
Howard Schultz has lived an American dream. It's been good for business. He argues it's been good for people who work for his business. Does that mean he understands the American people? Well, he's never served them in public service or government. He's never voted much alongside them. That's from the majority of recent elections. But he is exploring whether voters should promote him to run the company, should run the country, because he ran the company. And this, I think, raises some big questions. Would Schultz hire someone to run Starbucks if they'd never worked in business? Running the country is even harder. And can Starbucks actually be, this is really big, Can Starbucks be the basis for this potential Schultz candidacy when he's now running against policies backing the things that Starbucks provided its own employees, from those claimed living wages to the health care to the occasional tuition? Many right now, you've heard, are slamming Schultz for a superficial, solipsistic spoilerism that could re-elect Trump. But there's another question also facing his candidacy, and it's substantive. If he had such a grand, well-funded vision for the social impact of a for-profit company with these values and the education and the health care that they tout, why is his vision for American government so much less ambitious?
The role and responsibility of a for-profit public company can't be just about making money. It has to be about giving back, and it has to be about achieving the balance between profit and social impact.
And the government to give everyone a job, which basically is $40 trillion on the balance sheet of $21.5 trillion. We can't afford it.
Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.